live. Today, I have the honor of interviewing Substantial, a prolific artist from the DMV. He's released 5 solo albums and numerous albums in collaboration with other producers. He's a producer, and he's been grinding for decades at this point. He recently released a new album called Adultish, currently available exclusively on his Bandcamp. We're going to bring him in and talk to him about his musical journey, what he's currently working on, and future plans. Peace.
Peace.
Thank you so much, family. So good to see you. Man, what a career you have had.
Oh, man, thank you.
Yeah, bro. And, you know, it's like I go through and do research on people that I interview, and some people, it's like you're kind of digging for, like, good stuff. With you, it's like, I'm not going to be able to cover all of this. It's like you're just so prolific in different ways. It's not just your music. You've expanded into so many areas, education, the merchandise you're doing. You're doing merchandise in a whole different way. The way you keep your fan base engaged through your Patreon and through your weekly updates on YouTube and Twitch. Dude, you're killing it in every way. I mean, really, like, as this is why you have a consulting, right? Like, you know how to do this, right? So I want to be sure we get into everything. But what I always love to do is, you know, allow the artist to speak about how they fell in love with music, how they first got started, you know, kind of give that origin story. And then we're going to work our way through some of your catalog because it's so immense. And I want to make sure we talk about this incredible new album you just dropped.
Oh, man. Thank you, brother. Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me, man. Yeah, I would say, like, in terms of my love for music, man, it really started really young, and I think it probably, I would say it started with dancing, really, first and foremost. Yeah, before I ever wanted to rap, you know, or make beats or anything like that, I just loved dancing. And you know, so like when breaking and hip hop was introduced to us via like different music videos or like films like Beat Street or Breaking or like the different stuff that I was seeing as a kid, I just knew that was something I wanted to be a part of. And the easiest way in for me, first and foremost, was dancing, right? And so I just remember at school looking for opportunities to jump on stage and dance, and then of course in the neighborhood. And I want to say, like, by like toward the end of my years in elementary school and into middle school, I kind of had a reputation for dancing first and foremost, that, like, you know, would get me invites to certain parties and all of that. But yeah, I mean, that was definitely the way in, man. I always loved hip hop, the music specifically, and you know, just it was just a part of my everyday, you know.
Yeah. I remember that era. There's an era that, you know, to some extent, and that's why it's important to have people like you and people talking about it, especially with Hip Hop 50, right? Breakdancing is what opened the doors for hip hop, really. Breakdancing and then graffiti, and then rap and the music took over later on. But in the early days, it was all about kids, and, you know, I grew up in an apartment complex. We had cardboard boxes, right? And, like,
same.
Right? All of that. So that's really dope. That's really, really dope. At what point did you start writing?
I wrote my first rhyme when I was probably like 10 years old. Yeah, I was 10 when I wrote my first rhyme. So like I'm 44 now, so we're talking about 34 years ago.
Yeah.
And then yeah, man, after writing my first rap, I didn't really like try to explore it and really see how far I could go with it initially. You know, it took a couple more years before I was like, all right, I'm gonna really try to do this. I'm gonna try to put together a demo. I'm gonna see what could come of this. It really wasn't until I got in high school where I started writing consistently.
Wow. Did you, you know, start off as a person that's more kind of like the poetry writing, you know, things out? Okay, because there's a whole freestyle. There's people who get into freestyle also. Did you do that?
Yeah. So for me, it started with the writing. I was writing poems before I was writing raps, and I would say by the time I got to high school, like a lot of kids do, before you're rapping a lot of times, because you love rap music, you know all the words to the different songs. So we'd be at the lunch table, like as most of us were in high school, you know, just beating on the table, rapping our favorite songs. And at some point, my voice started to get a bit deeper,
Yeah.
and I would get compliments like, "Man, you sound better than some of the rappers do
Right.
saying their stuff." And that was crazy for me to hear that, you know, like, you know, that does a ton for your ego and your confidence. So,
Yeah.
you know, one of my homies was like, "Man, I'm gonna go home and write something. You try to write something too. We'll come back, compare, you know, next day." And that was really like, that just opened the floodgates. And so then it switched from us rapping other people's lyrics to us rapping our own lyrics and freestyling, and then eventually
Yeah.
battling, you know.
Yeah. You do have a dope voice, my bro.
Thank you,
Yeah.
brother. I
I mean,
appreciate that, man.
you
Thank
immediately hear it, it's like they're substantial. You know what I'm
you.
saying?
Oh man,
Yeah.
thank you, bro.
Yeah, for sure. It's you got that cadence, and you know, you're so deep in the game at this point, thousands and thousands of hours of experience,
Mhm.
that you've mastered your craft with the tools you have. So the beats and your rhymes and the way you put songs together with your instrument is masterful. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, thank you
As we
so
can
much,
tell
bro.
by the love you get from around the world. You know what I mean?
I appreciate it,
Yeah.
brother. Thank you, man.
Yeah, facts. You know, so you know, we worked our way through some of high school. Do you have like some early rap groups? You know, because there's the Q&5
Yeah.
era, there's the New York era, right? This is kind of
hmm
like when I first heard about you. But like,
hmm
I'm interested in that. You know, I guess high school to Q&5. You're sharpening your sword. You're learning.
hmm
You know, that early studio work. Can you share some of that with us?
Yeah, for sure. So, first rap group I was in, it was a bunch of homies, like close friends of mine, from high school. We had a group called Scan back in the day, and it was based off of, I don't know if we can curse,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
it was based off of an Outkast lyric where Big Boy was like, "Back in the day when we was slaves, I bet we was some cool ass niggas." That's what he said. So Scan just stood for some cool ass niggas, like
Got it.
real basic basic rap name, you know, a basic rap group name. It wasn't nothing fancy, but it was just me and the homies, man. Before that group, because it was like five of us. But before that, it was me, my homie J Cash, who I'm still good friends with, my brother, my man Jamal, who I grew up with, still keep in contact with too. And it was like three of us. Eventually, I met the Scan crew. We kind of built from there. From there, we had a clique of rappers and producers called UV. So when I first moved to New York, I was really doing stuff real heavy with UV, and I just happened to meet Packer Film first,
Wow.
you know, and from through Packer Film, I met Tonedeff, who mixed and mastered the new album, and of course created Q&5 music, and then later Session and the rest of the crew. And like, you know, we just bonded, man. We collaborated a bunch of times, and Pac and I, before I joined Q&5, Pac and I, we used to go by Pakistan, right? Like, and like the country, but like,
Yeah.
it was just with the Y in the middle, so it was Pac and Stan
Right.
basically in
Right.
Spanish. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, man. Just, you know, like I feel like all of these different groups, all of these collaborations just helped me sharpen the sword, man. I learned so much from every group I've been a part of, every crew that I've been a part
Yeah.
of, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that background.
Mm.
That's a good story with Pac FM too. That
Yeah.
kind of those early forgotten, but y'all probably had some dope songs and some good.
Oh yeah.
You know, all of that leads to like the masterpiece that you just dropped. You know what I mean? Like
Word.
you're kind of building on top of stuff.
hmm
You have another era, and I don't know, you know, where it falls. If it's during, you know, parallel to the Q&5 or slightly after or before,
hmm
but you've had, I guess it was ongoing, this relationship really early that I remember watching your career with
hmm
Japan,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You were like one of the first MCs before, you know, people were going to Germany and people were doing stuff like in Europe a little bit. But I remember
hmm
back when I first started seeing you doing stuff in Japan heavily, like not like a one trip, like multiple trips, working with that community out there, having a strong following and support, right? That was really unique, especially for a cat from the DMV and from even New York, right? It was not being done. Now hip hop's more global than it was back when you were kind of doing this. How did that relationship with Japan and with, you know, those creatives and all of that happen?
Yeah. So, you know, shout out to my man, my boy Tomo. My man, Sphere of Influence was is his rap name. He still puts out music. We went to college together, Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York. And he could rap in English and Japanese. We would hang out sometimes. Me, him, my man Bisco Smith, and a bunch of other dope folks who went to Pratt. And we exchanged numbers right before he went home to go back for the summer. And while he was there, he basically worked at a record store called Guinness Records that was owned by Nujabes, who ran this label called Hideout Productions. At this time, no one knew who Nujabes was. This is long before Samurai Champloo. And this is before, like, you know, he became what we know is like one of the pioneers of lo-fi, right? And so, yeah, man, he was working at the record store, and Nujabes just basically asked him, you know, any dope rappers in New York? And he mentioned me, which was crazy. It's always crazy to me when I think of that, because I'm not from New York originally, right? And we just happened to be going to school together, and built a relationship like that. And you know, New York has no shortage of dope rappers, right?
No. And Brooklyn has no shortage of,
man. Come on, bro. Yeah. So, but he mentioned me, and you know, he played this mixtape that my man Bisco had put together, because Bisco used to DJ for me and would have me, Pack, and different homies jump on his mixtapes. And so he played this joint I did, which was over a Medina Green beat. You know, shout out to them. And man, he loved it. So he got my number from Tomo, reached out. I always joke about how that conversation took place because I didn't know he was calling. And because of his accent, I thought it was a joke at first. I didn't really take it serious until he started mentioning Tomo and how he found out about me. And I was like, oh, this is real.
Yeah.
And he asked for a demo that I just finished putting together a demo for Def Jam, because at the time I had a homie, my man Jamin. He's DJ Enough's cousin, and DJ Enough was an A&R at Def Jam.
Wow.
So I just had that demo sent over to him, but things didn't work out. So I still had this demo ready and sent it to Japan, and Nujabes loved it and basically offered me a record deal. This was 99, you know, and like when we were sending stuff back and forth, this wasn't via email. Like we're mailing tapes, we're mailing cassettes to each other, right? And so, yeah, it's just different times, man. It's crazy how it happened, though, you know?
Yeah. No, it's what's so incredible, and thanks for sharing all of that, man. How things are connected, right? How you were going to, you know, you love music, you're pursuing it, you go to New York, you know, you hang with the homies. Hip hop is such a big part of your life, and how these relationships led to, you know, everything that came after, right? How many projects did you wind up doing with them, and, you know, how did that deal work out, and how many projects did you release over there?
Yeah, so with Hideout Productions and Nujabes, my first album, To This Union, A Son Was Born, that was the first full-length album that Hideout Productions had ever put out, before Nujabes dropped the compilations and then later his solo work. You know, I would say, I mean, that was the main full-length project, but then after that, I was featured on every one of his projects after. So most of their full-length releases I'm on. And then I was on, I mean, then we released God knows how many singles, man. At least like six or seven vinyl records, like vinyl singles. So we did a lot of collaborating in between, I want to say from 2000 when I first flew out there up until Nujabes passed away. He passed away 2010, and we had like maybe a few unfinished tracks around the time he passed away. Some of which I recorded in 2007, and then one or two that I recorded a bit closer to around the time he passed. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. What an amazing experience, man. Thanks for sharing all of that.
Okay.
I've always been curious about it. I've always wanted to know. I mean, for years, from way before this platform, I was like, how's he doing that stuff in Japan? That's so dope. You know?
What's really crazy about that too is out there was really, really interesting. You know how here in the US, if a MC is popping, you start to see them do a ton of collaborations with other artists in the region that they're in, right? Or the region that they're popping in. But like, man, they're very tribal. They were very tribal, like the indie labels in Japan. So while Nujabes was alive, while I was signed to Hideout, he really didn't want me doing a whole lot of collabs with different indie labels and stuff. So a lot of people wouldn't reach out, or they would reach out, but they're reaching out through him. And so I wouldn't hear about it, right?
Wow.
And it wasn't until like 2007 I was out there on tour, and it wasn't a tour set up through Nujabes, right? Because at that time I wasn't with Hideout. So what was crazy was basically they I got reached out to by I think the name of the producer is like Ficus or something like that, Ficus. But fam, like they literally set up a studio session, had me come out or whatever, and they was like, yo, do us a favor, don't let we know you're gonna see Nujabes at some point. Like kind of keep it on the low, you know. I'm like, yeah, folks. But that was again, this is before he passed and when he was still, because you know I was very much affiliated with that.
Right.
It's almost like gang stuff, right? Like you can't be over here like mixing
up
hanging with those folks.
Different cultures.
Yeah,
that's really
it was wild.
That's cool. Thanks for sharing that. It's almost like here, like you are the creator, right? And if you want to mess with this producer or this MC, it's on you. Over there, it's like it's teams, it's squads.
Yeah, for sure. It wasn't until like after, like really after that 2007 period, and of course after he passed away, like floodgates kind of opened, and like it's like now. I mean, I have so many collaborations because so many people out there grew up on my music, you know?
That's dope. So here we are about a week or just under a week since the release of what a lot of people are calling your magnum opus, potentially, you know, the best album that you've released, and you've released a lot of albums. The first album that you've completely self-produced, Adultish, currently available only on your Bandcamp. It will not be available on digital streaming platforms for another week or so, right? Talk to us about this new album, Adultish, what it means to you, everything, because your music has gone, you know, we've watched you grow up through your music, right? You've gone through the dope spitter with the dope voice, PG County. It's interesting because PG County is a place the MCs come from now, and you're part of that, right? But it wasn't back in the day, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
PG County, Brooklyn, we've watched you grow up, everything in Japan, and here we arrive at what many are calling the best album you've ever done, which is to say a lot, Adultish.
Wow, yeah. Well, first, thank you, man. Yeah, it's been crazy just hearing that, like really trying to, like every time I release something, I put everything I got at that time into it. And I've kind of humbled myself over the years because sometimes you're really proud of something and the audience doesn't necessarily respond the way you think they'll respond. And so you know, with this one going into it, as I got close to finishing it and letting a lot of people who were working closely with me on the record hear where we were at that point. And so many people were saying similar stuff before it was even mixed. They were like, man, this sounds like this might be your best record, bro.
Wow.
This is like, you know, and my barber, who's one of my best friends, man, my brother Sherm the barber, he was like, he said the same thing to me. And then he looked at me and was like, man, I almost feel like you don't know how significant this record is, bro. And I had to tell him, I was like, man, nah, it's not that. Like I'm putting everything I have at this point, which I believe is a lot, into this. And but also just really keeping my cool and just being like, man, whatever happens, happens. Because, it's tough sometimes as an artist to put everything into something, release it, and then it gets underappreciated, right?
Yeah.
And I've had that happen a ton in my career, right? Like I don't expect to be covered by certain sites. I don't expect to be in the in most of these most of the press end of the year best albums, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Like I don't let that be my quote unquote motivation, right? Because that's an easy way to lead the heartbreak, disappointment, and me be out of here, right? So I just focus on the art, man. I put together a solid business plan, certain strategies that I've seen different artists and people I respect apply to their careers, and then other things that a lot of people don't tap into because, quite frankly, a lot of folks don't read and research. And with the company that I run, there's a lot of information that we gather that can be useful in the hip hop / music space that isn't always leveraged. So yeah, man. So I say all that to say this record, what it represents and what it's about. It's called Adultish, and for me, I just really define that as a grown up with more growing to do. And a lot of times, it kind of gets a laugh for some people because I think they kind of go like the man child route, right? Like a grown ass kid. And that's not really what it's about. What it really is about is being a lifetime learner, right? Like dedicating yourself to constantly learning, constantly bettering yourself. And for a lot of people who grew up in my generation and come from certain communities, like the different places I lived in PG growing up, from Landover to Suitland and just places like that, and then eventually moving to Brooklyn, New York, living in rough neighborhoods there, from Fort Greene to Bed-Stuy, then moving back to Maryland and living in Baltimore.
Yeah.
A lot of times you don't expect to grow old. You know what I mean? Like I just, a lot of my homies checked out young. You know what I mean? Like, and some of my music peers checked out in their 30s, right? Which was the oldest, like some of these brothers got to live. So, or see. So I think it's like the album is really exploring. It's like, what do you do when you're a person in hip hop that is blessed enough to grow old in hip hop, right? What does that look like for someone who didn't expect to grow old, right? And fully embracing that, not looking at growing old as a negative thing like a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And doing my best job to also make this grown folk shit look cool, man. Because I think part of the reason why so many people check out early is we're a bit more reckless when we're young, because we think it's all about right now, and we might not see this other point. And so if we don't see this other point, we gotta take every risk, do everything we can do right now. And I'm really just trying to change that narrative a little bit to let folks know it's like, man, there's something doper like down the pipeline, right? If you live long enough, you get to see the fruits of your labor, all this hard work you put in, what it looks like. Watch these kids grow up, right? See what people's lives turn into, the different lives you've touched over the years, different people you've helped, see what they become. But like, in order to do that, you got to be here. You know what I mean? You got to be present. You gotta take care of yourself. And so yeah, man, the album kind of deals with all of those different things, dealing with loss, you know what I mean, and recognizing that there's a lot of people who don't make the journey with you. But yeah, man, just touching on all of that,
That's beautiful, man. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, brother.
What a dope vision. Yeah, what a dope vision. We all grew up with groups like the Native Tongue Family, right? Where they were like a different type of hip hop than, stuff that I love also, like Wu-Tang Clan and, you know, Queensbridge and all of that stuff. You had like the Native Tongue family, which was a different spin on hip hop, which was dope music, and they were dope, and Tribe and De La and the Jungle Brothers. And not necessarily sonically, not the way your music sounds, but the vibe that you're bringing of an alternative, right? You've got a soulful hip hop, right? You've got introspective, deep penetrating lyrics that are coming from life experience and that are honest and vulnerable and real. And it's really the real adversity in life, because you're embracing, I'm in a very youth-oriented type of music, which is urban music, right? And I'm out of my 20s and I'm doper. And I'm better now than I was. And check out the production, and check out the knowledge on how to do a rollout, and check out this new merchandise with the shoes and the shirts and the sweatshirts. And I mean, everything is being done masterfully in a way that an 18-year-old or a 22-year-old probably can't. They need the knowledge you have, right? But then your sword is so sharp, bro. You're like, you know what I'm saying? Your pen game is up there with anybody, right? So I love to see what you're doing and creating your own lane and leveraging all the technology that exists today. Patreon, Kickstarter, the way you use YouTube, the way that you're using everything is truly, I think, on the cutting edge of what being an independent artist and being a small business owner, right? Sometimes we think of music too small. You're a small business owner and you're killing it, bro. Can you talk to us about some of the unique merchandise that you're rolling out with Adultish?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, you mentioned probably the thing that has gotten a lot of people's attention is I'm a dude that's always you know, I don't know when I first got into Vans, but like I know that once I was introduced to Vans, I was like, oh, this is my shit right here. I really love Vans, and so you know, when I had the idea to do a shoe, the way it came to me, I just happened to be on their website, and I just completely forgot that you could customize your own Vans.
Wow.
And the skate highs have been some of my favorites for a while. And I don't know how many pairs of skate highs I've owned at this point, but I just went on there and we spent about a year, not quite a year, but like for a while I was working with Ryan Espelita, who's one of the visual artists who I collaborated with on the album. And I gave him like the color palette for the record, like probably 2 years ago. Before the album was even done, I knew what the color palette for the design and all of that was going to be. I went to school for graphic design, so I'm not thinking just about the music, right? I'm thinking about the artistic vision. Like all of these different things are communicating different ideas and stuff. And so we started working on some cover art that was in a different direction. That didn't pan out, but I liked working with Ryan a lot. He seemed to be really into the music, so I was like, look, we're going to go a different direction, which is more around photography. However, I got this idea for a pattern. I don't know what the pattern looks like yet, but I know these are the colors we want to use. And I've already found a bunch of fabrics and paper that I like to create these textures. I just need the actual pattern created. So he got back to me, created this really dope pattern. And I was like, yo, that's it. And I told him before, I was like, that pattern is going to be like, it's going to work for the cover art. We're going to use it for like all over print shirts and hoodies. And we're going to, and the shoe hadn't even come together yet. But once I was on that site, I was like, all right. And that was after the Kickstarter had ended. And that worked out great because even though the Kickstarter was successful, you know, part of how you keep people engaged is find new merchandise and other things to introduce to folks. And so the shoe came a bit later. And then also the snapback hats, and which are a little different because you got the brim looks like it's a solid color on top, but you flip it up, you see the pattern from the album. So and how I think about design a lot of times with the merchandise, I think a lot of times artists are trying to force certain parts of them on people who don't necessarily know who they are. So from a marketing standpoint, I'm thinking more of let me push the idea on you more so than pushing me on you. If I can get buy-in for the idea, maybe you'll come around to me later, and that's okay, right? And if you never come around to me, that's all right. I got your money, right?
Yeah,
So,
it was a fair trade. We're good.
yeah, it's a transaction. Boom. You got something you like that you have your own idea of what it represents, and outside of me, it still works for you, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I feel like the best product can do that.
Yeah.
It can mean something deeper and look really cool and be aesthetically pleasing, but also have deeper meaning.
Yeah.
But it really just serves whatever purpose the consumer needs, which a lot of times is based on aesthetic or their own personal beliefs and how it ties into it. And Adultish, that's something that a ton of people, can relate to in some ways, or know somebody that can relate to it. And so it's been cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. We talked about the shoes, right? And you gave us the background story on that, which was really dope. The snapbacks, right? There's shirts and there's sweatshirts also. The vinyl. I think the vinyl is really dope because it's a double vinyl, right? Which is dope and hard to do. That's harder to do. You gotta dig and research on how to, what the right company is for that. And that vinyl has the actual album and then instrumentals also, because you produced this entire album.
Right. Yeah. And that was, from the gate, I knew that was something, I wanted to do. And the challenge a lot of times is when I think a lot of artists don't like to work with constraints, right? Where with me, what I've learned is I like certain barriers, right? Like I don't mind finding out ahead of time that you can do this, but it needs to be, you need to fit all of that within a certain time frame. And so I welcome challenges like that, because it's just, I feel like that's part of being a professional, right? It's one thing to just be a artist in general. It's a different thing being a professional artist, because a professional artist most times has to work within certain constraints. And so to be able to make something that is authentically you, while still working within those constraints, I feel like the best and most successful artists do that extremely well. And even though I'm indie, that's something, just the marketing side of me and like the business minded person that I am, that's something I consider. So the constraint that I had to figure out was, vinyl, typically for the quality to not be degraded, and the best case scenario is to try to keep it under 40 minutes, right? You try to keep it right around that line. So I think the album probably ends at like 39 minutes and like 58 or 59 seconds.
Right there.
Right there, right? And so talking with my engineer, my brother Tonedeff, about like keeping that in mind as we added the interludes and making that work, and then having conversations with the distributor while we were wrapping up not the distributor, the manufacturer, to make sure we worked it within, because I wanted it to fit on one vinyl, so I didn't have to press up a double LP for just the album, because I wanted the people to be able to get the instrumentals and the album as a double LP.
That's dope. That's really dope. And the whole conversation on essentially what people at the highest levels of the game do very well is that they're working within constraints and still making their art and the authenticity of who they are artistically shine. That's really valuable. When if people go over to your website or to your Bandcamp and they go into the merchandise, stuff sells out, right? So if you scroll down and you look at past projects, everything's selling out. Right now, while there's still the option to purchase the new album, Adultish, vinyl, sneakers, hats, sweatshirts, t-shirts, CDs, what's the best place for people to go right now and buy that album?
Yeah, definitely Bandcamp. I was very intentional with starting it there. I love Bandcamp as a platform. It's like, one, it's a platform created by other musicians. It's ad free. They make it very easy for you to get yourself in front of editorial there. They're very supportive of artists at different levels. So I've gotten opportunities from them when I wasn't necessarily as popular, and you know, I mean, hell, not just to cover my record. I remember when Prince passed away. Like somehow one of the staff people, I think they had saw something where I talked about how much of a Prince fan I was, and so they gave me an opportunity to just be a part of like a bunch of other artists, some of which actually worked with Prince, and then some who were fans on Bandcamp, just talking about him. And so I really love what they're doing as a company, and you know, just I mean how they pay out the artists and the transparency that exists there. So they're definitely one of the best products out there, and I tell artists all the time, it's like the great thing about it, you have way more control. You can do stuff on a whim if you want to, or you can plan something out really thoroughly. And they're very good at letting you communicate with your fans with very little barriers. So they're a great platform for that. I mean, you're still, as my man Session and I had a conversation recently about, you're still building a house on rented land, on land that you're renting, but of all of the property that's out there, you know, of all the land that's out there, is definitely you know, one of the better situations. So Bandcamp, substantial.bandcamp.com, that's the place to go. Also, one of the cool merch items we got is the USB cassette. It looks like a cassette, but it's a USB drive that holds like 8 gigs, and I think it's like close to 5 gigs worth of music, nearly 500 songs on there, as well as the ebook, my children's book I did a couple years ago. So yeah,
that's really, really dope.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for sharing all that. I wanted to talk a little bit about your company, Substantial Art Music Consulting Company. Talk to us about that. You have incredible experiences. You've performed in over 20 countries with artists, you know, at all different levels, to include DJ Kool Herc and people like Oddisee that are touring all over. You have a lot of knowledge, as you've been explaining, on the rollout of this project. You have a consulting company, and you do a lot of work in education also. Talk to us about your company.
Sure, yeah. So Substantial Art and Music, it's a company that my wife and I own. My wife is a visual artist as well. We met in college, and she's also an arts administrator, a former grants manager for Arts Fairfax. So she sat on a bunch of different panels over time, and these panels, like, you know, decided what artists would get like thousands of dollars based on, like, you know, artistic merit. And so we've constantly over the years have been, you know, just chopping it up with our friends about what they're doing and giving them ideas or them helping us out. So it's one of those things where we've been consulting for years without it being called consulting. And it took my brother, my man Kokayi, who encouraged me to join the local Grammy chapter in the DC area. It took him to basically come to me and say, he invited me to one of the events, and while I was there, I was talking to some guys about social media, and the guy was really speaking on a bunch of stuff I could tell he didn't fully grasp how to use that platform. So, you know, rather than judging, I was just like giving him tips, right? Like, man, try this, boom, boom, boom. And I could see he was locked in, but what I didn't see, because I was so focused on him, was like it went from him and I talking to like a group of nearly 20 people just standing around, taking in what was being said. Yeah. So Kokayi leans over and he was like, "Bro, you really need to be." He's like, "Man, you really need to be consulting, man." And so my wife and I were talking about starting our business. And initially, what we were going to do was take our programming into schools that didn't have arts, right? And we were going to help in different ways by supplying different program and materials to those schools. But there were a bunch of programs like that already existed. And what we realized with the consulting thing is man, there's a bunch of grown folk out here that need this same help,
Yeah.
right? Like they don't have these resources that we have. They don't know how to move in these spaces the way we know how to move.
Yeah.
So we gotta, you know, like maybe there's something to that. And it was an easier process getting in touch with these folks versus getting approved to come into these schools, getting clearance or whatever in certain situations. And there's some limitations, right?
Yeah.
So long story short, you know, we started this company in 2017, and we've consulted artists like around the world. You know, we've helped different artists and companies receive grants to fund what they do.
Wow.
And yeah, it's really, really dope. We've for our company, we've raised probably I think around 80 grand, maybe over 80 grand via crowdfunding. But we've helped other folks, other companies and individuals raise close to $500,000.
Wow.
So, you know, it's dope, man. Like it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy the whole art of coming up with a plan to really, really help people become successful, and you know, or just and help people redefine what success looks like. Because a lot of times we're looking at other artists and comparing ourselves to them.
Yeah.
And you know, success doesn't look the same for everyone. You know, and yeah, man. So we just do what we can to help redefine what that looks like for people, and then help them grow. Because I think we're so focused on the destination a lot of times that we don't think about the journey and really kind of taking it step by step and making sure that we're elevating and growing. So we try to keep that growth mindset and introduce that to a lot of the artists we work with.
That's really good. If people want to, you know, use your company for consulting services, where do they find out about it? Where can they go and contact you about that?
Yeah, the website is subartandmusic.com, subartandmusic.com. They go to the contact page. They can either shoot us an email there, but then there's also a link to a form that they can. It's like a pre-consultation, so they can just fill that out. Let us know what the project is, what help they need, et cetera, budget and all of that, and then we just really take it from there. And we usually do like a 30-minute free consultation just to kind of let them know what we can and can't do for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at one point in time, we were doing like a wraparound service thing where we were helping people with design and design as well. These days, we're very much more focused on the consultations and really just, you know, teaching people how to fish, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. One of the things that I think is really dope is how you've built your community around your music. And in doing my research and being all up in your YouTube, right, I think that the weekly updates that you do, right, the Substantial Weekly is really, really dope. Can you talk to us about how you engage with your community, how you're using, you know, specifically YouTube, but also other forms of social media to keep your community, the people who are into what you do, your sound, your voice, your life experience, because you've opened up your life, you know, from becoming a father and what it means, you know, and all of that. You know, we're all growing with you, right? And it's a beautiful thing. Talk to us about how you've kind of built this community around yourself.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Yeah, I think the thing that I've realized over the years, like some of the conversations that fans would have with me, you know, I felt like it was a bit different than what I was seeing in different places I would go to. Like, you know, people saying things like, man, this song that you wrote about your wife, like when my wife came down the aisle or whatever, that I had that song playing, right? Like folks had like deeper connections with the stuff I was making. And I think that was largely because of how open I was in my music, right? Like I think early on, I think when we think about artists selling out, so to speak, right? We look at it different ways. Like I think we associated a lot of times with the artist making stuff that sounds more commercial or it sounds a bit generic. But what was interesting with me was early in my career, I was more known as a battle rapper before I did my first album. And when I did that first album, there were songs that very much were like battle rap songs, and then there was a lot of personal stuff. When the album came out, it was the personal stuff that really, really connected with people and really like pushed my career forward. So when that happened, you know, I just made a conscious effort to, no, that didn't work. I just tried to make a conscious effort to, you know, like try to open up a bit more. So it was kind of like I was keeping in mind that like my music performs better business wise when I make more personal stuff.
Yeah.
Which is what major companies do all the time. Like, well, this is doing really well for you, so make more of this. And which, you know, could kind of be looked at a certain way, but I knew I wanted to do this as a career. And so anyway, as I've over the years, I've just made a conscious effort to kind of make myself available as much as possible to the people who really support what I do. You know, so it's not about, for me, it's not always about reaching as many people as possible. It's about the people who've made real connections with what I do. How can I keep them as engaged as possible and supporting what I do and making myself available and being my authentic self with them? And they'll help me get the word out, right? And it might be a slower process, but I think part of what sustained me this long and that helped me sustain this long in the industry is because of the relationships I've built with my audience. And so I use social media in a way that allows me to expand on that. You know, because we're me and my brothers at QM5 were people that adopted the internet real early, and were made fun of for doing that. We were called net seeds. We were corny, right, back in the day, for doing it. Now you're an idiot if you're not doing it, right? And so, yeah, man, we basically, so now, like, because of the different music I've made and because of some of the stuff I've done with social media, I meet people sometimes who work at these social media companies who are fans of what I do. And I've been blessed, man. Shout out to some folks I know over at YouTube who've looked out and really given me a lot of great information to keep my audience engaged and expand my audience a bit while being my authentic self. So I learned a lot working with them, and they've helped me tighten up my little operation, you know?
Yeah, nah, it's really dope, and it's really cool. So basically, once a week, like I think it's on Fridays.
Fridays at noon. Yep.
Right, you have like a standing live. It's like you go live on YouTube and you give an update on everything substantial, what you're working on, right? Things that you've got going on. Is there more stuff that you cover? Is that?
I usually I cover, like, you know, new music drops on Fridays most times. So if a new song has come out that I released, I cover that. If one of the people that I'm affiliated with, even if I'm not on the release, I sometimes plug some of my friends' releases. You know, there's been times where homies were going through personal stuff and they were trying to fundraise and stuff to get money, help with I use the platform sometimes to help promote other things like that. But then, you know, events that's coming up, people can get that information there. And then, just I'm promoting my podcast, the podcast I do with my wife called Artistry. You know, so I just use it to keep people updated. And the great thing about it, one of the things I learned when working with YouTube was consistency is key, right? That's been consistency has helped me grow as an artist and helped me build the career that I have. But in terms of saying that you're going to go live and creating an actual schedule so people have expectations and know that, well, if I haven't heard anything from Substantial all week, I know YouTube, Friday, noon, Eastern Standard Time, I can go ahead and get an update from Substantial himself instead of waiting for a website to cover what I got going on. They can get it directly from me, you know?
Yeah, that's dope. Yeah. And it's really dope the way you've done it. It looks good also on your page. Everything's
Thank
cool
you, brother.
about that. Yeah.
Thank you, man.
You have also worked as a hip hop ambassador.
Yes.
Companies like Next Level and Words Beats and Life. Talk to us about that experience and, you know, where you're going with that. Like what countries, I guess, is you know.
Yeah.
Because you
Man,
actually go, like it's not even a figurative. I'm not saying it figuratively. You go
yeah.
to locations.
Right, yeah, man. So that's something that you know, I first found out that I was going to be doing that back in 2020. It was crazy because I applied at the top of 2020 before the pandemic popped off for Next Level, and it was crazy because I got approved, but like the pandemic was finally like it was here, things were shut down, and but I was just excited for the opportunity. And long story short, what that program, what Next Level does is they select different artists like who do the various disciplines of hip hop, and they put together a team. Most of the time, it's people you haven't worked with before or even met. Y'all do some training together, and then they select a destination for you. Your team leader goes ahead of time and works with local organizations and finds people who are interested in the program. And then you basically you go out there, and it's a residency where you work with various artists in that community on your discipline. So I was a part of Team Romania. Shout out to my amazing team, our team leader, A. Billy, you know, DJ Action. I saw Rochelle up in here earlier. She was in the chat a little while ago. You know, and then who else? Amira Sackett, and then my homegirl Genesis B as well. So we had a really dope team. Oh, and my man Sake One, really dope visual artist, graph artist. So anyway, we put together this team. We all work in our discipline. My team, my situation, it was 2 MCs instead of 1.
Yeah.
And so I was working with artists out there specifically on their live performance.
Wow.
So one, Genesis B was working with them on songwriting. And of course, there'd be some overlap sometimes, but I was just coaching them on how to produce a better live show, working with them on their breath control, you know, crowd participation and engagement, like all of these things. And it was just like a week-long boot camp. And we prepped them for a big show that we did at the end of the week, you know, where they got to test out some of the things that they learned. And it was, yeah, man, it was an amazing experience. And that was all in Romania. We were in Timișoara, and we went to Bucharest. And then with Words, Beats, and Life, was doing more cultural diplomacy work with them. Shout out to my brother Mazi Mustafa, who first when he first told me about it, it was initially Brazil, and so I was like, man, that's dope, because I had never been to South America, right? I was like, man, listen, I ain't mad, right? So you know, we were planning everything out, and then the opportunity came up to go to Uganda, and he let me know. He was like, yo, so listen, you know, you got to choose. You can't do both. You can do Uganda or you can do Brazil. And I was like, you know, it was like, man, the ancestors are telling me to go to Africa first. So so I chose Uganda, and we were out there a week long working with poets, MCs, and visual artists, and a lot of the presentations that I do with Words, Beats, and not just with Words, Beats, and Life, but also with my company, Substantial Art and Music. I presented to them out there, learned about the industry there, was giving them tips on how to pivot and maneuver. Just really trying to coach them on that and building relationships. And I still communicate with some of the artists I met in both countries. And dude, it's just amazing, man. It's really one of those things. Look how far hip hop take us, right?
Yeah. It's amazing. Hip hop is truly at this point global, and there's people that you've never heard of making tremendous moves and tremendous money all over the world and in every language.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
It's really dope. The you know, I could pick your brain for hours because you have so much knowledge and such an incredible history. As we start to wrap, I want to make sure that one of the main things that you're pushing right now is this incredible new album that you just released, Adultish. It came out about a week ago. It's available exclusively right now on your Bandcamp. You have incredible merchandise, the sneakers that everybody's talking about, which are going to sell out, the double vinyl, right, with the album and the instrumentals, the CDs. You've got the USB cassette with over 500 songs, shirts, sweatshirts, right? All available right now in your Bandcamp. But the album itself is only available there, but it will be available in about a week on all digital streaming platforms.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, man.
Wow.
Yeah, man. Shout out to everyone who supported so far, man. The love has been tremendous. Shout out to Bandcamp who gave the album an excellent review.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been the love has been really, really dope. Like it's just been, listen, my love language is words of affirmation. And so what everyone has been saying to me, it confirmed a lot of the feelings I was having while working on the record. And I'm just happy that so many people see the vision and appreciate it. Because a lot went into this, you know what I mean? And I don't know how many more records I got in me like this, but I'm gonna do my best to keep elevating. The brother Chuck D, when I had the pleasure of meeting him, he said to me, he was like, man, he said, 50-year career. And I looked at him, I was like, what you mean? He was like, keep doing what you're doing. 50-year career. He's like, I know it sounds crazy. And then it's wild because I'm thinking about like how much older than me he is. And I'm like, yo, I don't think most hip hop artists think that they're going to be rapping or doing anything hip hop related for that long. And to know that somebody who's one of my heroes in this industry and has given me like just shared so many kind words when I was there and when I wasn't there. Like for somebody like that to see that in me, man, it's a blessing. So, I definitely keep that in mind and try to grow gracefully in this,
Yeah, and that's beautiful. And you're an incredible example, I think, for young artists coming up and for artists that are, older and trying to figure out how to like pivot, use new technologies, how to stay nimble and how to carve out a living and, actually create a company around their artistry and their knowledge. And you're actually paving the way in so many ways. And, you're getting knowledge and then getting your own, doing it your own stuff and then releasing it out there and, just crushing it on every level, Bro, I want to thank you. Brother. I want to thank you for the tremendous career you've had, for all the dope songs and all the dope moments, for sharing your life through your music. A lot of people are watching, including myself, and we're cheering for you. And this new album is a banger. Man, thank you so much, family. I appreciate, I appreciate all the love, bro. And man, I mean, thank you for the great interview, man. It's dope to be able to chop it up with you, man. I see you doing great work, brother. And I'm deeply honored to be a part of the work that you're doing. And I appreciate all the love, man. Thank you so much, bro. Absolutely. Salute. Peace, good brother. Peace, my man.